It's that time again. Save money now and buy these Nintendo Switch games before it's too late. I have years of experience buying games at the end of past console generations for cheap prices, and now some of them are worth hundreds, if not thousands. So I've spent hours going through the full Switch catalogue to let you know which games I feel will go up in value and the reasons why. Stick around until near the end of the video, as I've included a bonus item that isn't quite a game, but it's something you need to act on now and collect while the time is right. Okay, let's get to the games. So first up today we have God Wars, the complete legend, and this is a physical that, to be honest, I don't know a great deal about the game. It looks like a tactics style game. If you're into that style of gameplay, this could be one for you, but the real reason I think this could be one to pick up if you're looking to collect is that it's currently being delisted. So what I mean by that is that it's being delisted from the Nintendo eShop, and I'm going to be looking at a few titles today, and most of them, if not all of them, have been delisted. Usually what happens when something's delisted from the eShop, you'll see it have a bit of a spike in value, and sometimes they go really sky high because the game doesn't come back, and sometimes it'll fall down a little bit after that. But God Wars is one to keep an eye on. Next up we have Sega Genesis Classics Collection. This would be Mega Drive Collection if you're over in Europe, and this is a collection of I think 30 or 40 Genesis games or Mega Drive games. I actually got this one quite early on the Switch when it came out, so I've had the physical sitting there for a while, and obviously we know that Sega has delisted pretty much everything in terms of its retro output from all stores, so Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, and of course Nintendo's eShop have all been taken down. I seen recently that there's a rumor going around that Sega is actually looking to start up its own kind of subscription service, so maybe that is the reason why, or maybe we're looking at just getting a new collection at some point down the line. The ports on these games, they're not the best ever in terms of the emulation here, but it's a decent job to pick up a lot of games in one go, especially if you've never played anything on the Mega Drive or Genesis. It's got some really great games on the system, the like of the Sonic games, Streets of Rage. There's enough there for everyone to get something that they enjoy. The Lost Child. So the next game up, again just as the first, has been delisted from the eShop. Whether that's due to licensed music or not, I'm not too sure, but this is from our good old friends NIS America, and we know a lot of their physicals do end up going up the way in time, and this one is a very Japanese feeling game. It's inspired, it looks like, by Persona, so that kind of monster collecting. The dungeons and the collecting here will remind you of other Atlas titles, the like of Persona, or maybe if you're not into that style of game, something like Pokemon. The concept for this game is really crazy. I believe it's a journalist is given a weapon from God to take on hordes of demons and angels and stuff that have fallen from heaven. It's pretty out there and pretty crazy, but I guess if you're used to playing Japanese games, some of the themes and the storylines they come out with are definitely pretty wild, so you may be used to that. And like I said, with this one being published by NIS, being inspired by different Atlas games, both of those usually are good signs that the value could stay reasonably high on this type of game, and if you like what you see here in the trailer, it could be one that's worth your while checking out. Mad Games Tycoon. And this is one that's a little bit strange in terms of its premise. So what you're doing here is you're building your own kind of gaming empire. So you start your own game studio. I think it's set in the 1980s, and then through a kind of small enterprise starts to grow, and it seems like in that type of way it starts to get bigger and bigger, and eventually you are making larger offices, developing bigger games. So if you have any interest in kind of video game making or the behind the scenes of it, even as a fun kind of introduction to that, this is a fun, whimsical way to take on that kind of industry. For me, it didn't land very well in terms of the actual game's quality, but again, this is one that's delisted, and just with it being so unique in the fact that it's actually about video games themselves, I think it's one that will hold a bit of interest down the line. The cover for this one's really wacky as well. You've got this kind of cartoony art style on the cover, but the game, as I said, it wasn't necessarily one of my favourite ones that I've ever tried out. But if you're interested in game development, this could be one to add to your list. For anyone in North America, this is a European only, I believe. I don't think it came out in Japan or the Americas, so it's going to be European only. I think I picked mine up from Red Art Games, so if you want to have a look on there, you'll have to import this one. Stranger Things 3. This is one that I think will probably hold its value and become relatively rare in time. I think the price of it has gone up already, and I can see it being the case over time that it builds on that and becomes even more expensive. Reason being, it's a licensed tie-in, and of course, like the other ones that we've talked about, this has been removed from the Nintendo eShop. So the only way to get this currently is to pick up the physical. And because it's licensed, because it's part of the Stranger Things kind of universe, there's obviously an inbuilt fan base there. I know the fan base has fallen off somewhat. The first series or two of the show seem to do really well, but there are still fans out there, and there'll be people in the future that will get into the show and will want to pick this up. Usually something like this that's heavily licensed with maybe music or an IP that they can't get the rights for anymore, a lot of the time they won't end up coming back. We've seen it in the past with games being lost for decades and decades and eventually maybe getting re-released when there's a bit of pressure put out there. But this, I'd say, will be gone from the eShop for good. So the only way to pick it up is going to be through this physical version, and you can pick it up now before it gets any higher. Unto the End, and I think this is probably the best game of the bunch that I'm going to talk about today. That's why I've left it for near the end. If you're into your 2D side scrollers, if you're into harder games, we've obviously talked about them now in terms of Dark Soul likes, something like maybe Blasphemous comes to mind. This one could really be for you. The gameplay here is really good, but it's dark, it's dirty, the combat is horrific, you'll be chopping off people's limbs. So this one is definitely a darker, more adult story. It was distributed on Nintendo Switch by Red Art Games, so you may be able to look there for some copies, but I think they're mostly gone now. It might be best to look this one up on eBay. And again, for some reason, this one has been delisted from the Nintendo eShop. So if this looks like a great game to you, if it's that style of gameplay that you're into, I would definitely say jump in, and I would recommend this one. Alright, so ending today with our physical item that we like to end these videos with, and I want to look at Taiko no Tetsujin, and this is the drum controller that we have included there with it. And the reason I'm looking at this is because I think they've re-released this, so there are the drum RPG games and then there's just the rhythm game itself that originally came out. I think both of these, especially anyway in Europe, now come in a pack with the game and with the drum and drumsticks. And the reason this one's worth picking up is just because it makes the game infinitely more fun having this drum controller. It's such a unique style of controller, and we've had them obviously across different generations. Even if we look back at the Nintendo GameCube, you have something like the DK bongos as well, but I always like having that drum input controller. It reminds me of being at an arcade and having fun with friends. I had a few little issues with mine in terms of latency when connecting it up to the TV, but you can play around with it a bit and get it just right, and then you'll be having that arcade style fun at home. I want to thank you all very much for watching. It's going to recommend a video to you here at the end if you wouldn't mind clicking on it to support the channel and checking out some of our other content. And I'll see you guys in the next one.